Well, he's nobody's fool, so he's playing it cool as can be. He'll give
Hello again, everyone. This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports. This is a joint effort with Janelle Allbritton, MPH, owner-publisher of Westchester County Post.com and Speaking of Wellness. And we're here to talk about the combination of COVID, as it is today, and the National Football League, as we're taping this at the beginning of the Week 9 Sunday NFL games. Also at the end, we're going to speak briefly about Justin Turner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, who had come back on the field after being pulled from the game with COVID in Game 6 of the World Series, and the fact that he got no punishment from Major League Baseball. But we're going to start first with the NFL, and Janelle's really going to be the main person on this show, but I'll just give you some background. So Janelle, as you know, there are now, as of Sunday morning, 17 teams in the NFL that have players on the COVID list, or in a few instances, they had to shut down their facilities because the staff member, as opposed to a player, had COVID. And so this is becoming more and more of a problem. I know, you know, in the first 8 weeks, they had minor problems. The worst was they had to transfer a Titans game when they had 11 players positive and 10 staff positive to a future week where they were able to do that. All the other games they've been able to play, they might have moved it from a Sunday to a Monday, in some cases even to a Tuesday, but all the games have been played, and the one that was rescheduled for later. But now, as we're looking at daily cases in the US of 125,000 on back-to-back days, and more players are getting COVID, we're looking forward now to the rest of the season. What are your thoughts on moving forward? Do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better? Are you worried about the NFL completing the season? Because it's all about the money for the NFL, as you know.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my main answer. Just follow the money. And I will invoke the history of the chronic traumatic encephalopathy situation, which took literally decades to get the NFL to say, yeah, there's a problem, and then to quickly turn around and wash their hands and say, yeah, but they know it's a problem, and if they still choose to play, you know, we just cross our fingers and hope, you know, for the best for them. The upside, I suppose, if there is an upside, is that, you know, the results with COVID are much faster, and so they're not wearing masks when they are playing, are they?
In the actual game, no. There's been expanded rules recently that I'll go into a little later about they should wear them on the sidelines. Of course, they have to wear them during practice. But no, in the actual game, they are not required. And as far as I can see, watching a lot of games, nobody's actually wearing a mask as they're playing in an NFL game.
So let's just look at the physics of it. This is mind-blowing to me that they're doing this. They don't even have the plastic masks inside the helmets, right?
Correct. Some are wearing a certain kind of face guard that's part of a helmet, but no, they're not wearing like N95s on their nose or even the regular blue ones that most people wear.
Okay, so first of all, it's been demonstrated, you know, marathon runners can run a whole marathon with a mask on. So I'm not even going to argue about how athletes can play and get enough oxygen while they're wearing a mask. I'm just saying it's possible, and moving on. I'd like to refer people to a website called betweenthewaves.org. Just scroll down a little bit, and there's a very nice film put out by PBS. It's called Why Masks Work, and it's a very nice documentary of science technology called the Schlieren photography. And you will never look at someone sneezing again after you watch this video, I promise you. So we know that COVID travels in droplets, and as I've said many times, it's not Tinkerbell. The COVID virus doesn't just fly around by itself, does not have wings, right? But it travels in droplets. And when we're singing, when we are yelling, coughing, sneezing, speaking, doing anything that requires air to pass through our vocal cords, or to bring oxygen, you know, when we're doing anything aerobic, there's mist coming out of our nose and mouth, and it's the mist that could be carrying the coronavirus. And so when you're head to head with other people, banging heads with them, with great aerobic activity, a lot of muscular strength, a lot of power, a lot of physical effort going into it, it is just, the whole scrimmage line is just one long Petri dish. So once again, I'll extend my consulting services to Roger Goodell. I'm available, Roger, give me a call, because I read some of the protocol, and it's talking about, you know, X number of hours or days since the first symptoms, and they must be symptom-free for a certain number of time. We need to understand, and I haven't been able to research this yet with, you know, really dig in with a virologist, but we need to understand that being asymptomatic doesn't mean you're free and clear. You can be asymptomatic and still be infectious. You can still be contagious. And so it just depends on each person. It depends on their body storage of vitamin C, how strong their immune system is, whether they're able to, you know, keep a handle on the virus so it doesn't shed. It just depends on a lot of factors, and we don't have the testing to really narrow it down well enough. So to me, it just seems that the bottom line is, you know, if the NFL really cared about its players in a holistic sense, there would not have been all this flap about taking a knee on the sidelines. And, you know, we wouldn't have the story about Kaepernick that we have. And once again, I mean, I'm not the one politicizing this. Trump has already politicized COVID by marginalizing the scientists and, you know, claiming that the problem of COVID is over and that we've turned a corner. It's a complete lie. And anyone who believes him is believing him for political reasons and not for any other reason. And so the AP, the Associated Press, crunched some post-election numbers and determined that 93% of the 376 counties with the most COVID cases per capita voted for Trump. They were red counties. They went to Trump. But those were mostly rural counties in Montana, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota. So the good news is that it's less sparse population, but either way, whether sparse or dense doesn't matter. The point is that these are Trump voters who have the highest per capita of COVID cases. You know, and we're our third wave is higher than the first two put together, you know, which makes it worse than the second wave 100 years ago, which was much bigger than the first, but at least there were only two waves 100 years ago. Now we've got three, and we thought the first one was bad. So we see, you know, with the rallies, you know, Trump calling rallies, super spreader rallies, there's a big overlap between Trump voters and NFL fans. And, you know, I'm not going to draw any big correlation there because, you know, everybody's an NFL fan, but the truth is that a lot of the Trump fans are also NFL fans, which is shown by the impact on how the team owners make their decisions. And I've compared the red state governors with the red state team owners, and they are aligned in how they respond to COVID. And this would be an interesting study for somebody to do. But it's pretty clear that they align with the governor's policies in how they are putting the protections in place for the athletes. If you don't have athletes, you don't have a team. And so to me, that's the most important thing. You need to protect these athletes' health because, now we know that COVID can have very long-term effects, because now we have long haulers who've been suffering for months, and it can cause clots and heart attacks and strokes and kidney disease problems. And, you know, why say, oh, the athletes, they'll be fine. If they're infected, they'll get over it fast. They'll be fine. No, we don't know that for sure. And then the next argument is, oh, well, it's only 1%. It's a macabre argument when it could be prevented, all of it, in the first place. So these are these things that we really need to look at, because on everything that I'm reading on the NFL response, I just don't see how it's going to really keep a lid on it. Again, Adam Silver's my hero. He's the one who really gets it. He set up the bubble. That took a lot of resolve and a lot of guts to do that. And even then it wasn't perfect, but he was the best leader in the sports world to figure it out, besides Canada, you know, and just say Canada as a nation handled it the best and said, nope, if you want to play with us, you got to come here, and you're on our turf and you follow our rules. You know, so Adam Silver has done a great job, and the NFL could really lift a few pages from Canada and Adam Silver's playbooks.
So I want to give you a couple of examples on what's happened at the COVID list in the last few weeks, including this week. And that is, a few weeks ago, the Raiders had one of their linemen, the 5 linemen who always work together, he tested positive, and they made the other 4, because they were close contact, they made the other 4 go on the COVID list. But they have a rule in the NFL. If this happens on a Monday or a Tuesday and your game is the following Sunday, if you test negative 5 days in a row, you can then play that Sunday. And the other 4 Raider linesmen all tested negative 5 days in a row and played. This past week, Marlon Humphrey, star cornerback of the Ravens, had COVID. On Monday, they put 6 other guys, because of the close contact, they put 6 other guys on the Ravens. Players, good players, they put them on the list. All 6 of them had 5 consecutive days of negative tests. So they're actually going to play today, Sunday, in week 9. Or I should say 5 of the 6. One guy has a separate injury having nothing to do with COVID. So that's part of their protocols, where I was under the impression that you had to, sit out 10 days or 14 days. You should quarantine as opposed to isolate. And so what are your thoughts on this NFL rule? To me, it seems like a rule to get them to play next Sunday. If it happens on Monday or Tuesday, they can play on Sunday. If it happens later in the week, the example this week is Baker Mayfield, the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. They had a bye this week, but he could not have played if they had a game, because he just tested positive on Saturday. So he doesn't have that 5-day window. Matthew Stafford, star quarterback of the Lions, he was a close contact. I have to go quarantine on Monday, but he had negative tests Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So he is playing today in their game against the Vikings. So what are your thoughts? Is this a way around what would normally be the rules? Or is it what you said before? These guys are superb athletes. In theory, maybe this shouldn't bother them as much. Or is it just, we got to get our players to play, or else the league won't look as good competitively as they want it to look?
Well, once again, follow the money. And testing negative doesn't mean that you're not infected. It's more likely to have a false negative than a false positive. I don't know what tests they're getting. I don't know if they're getting the rapid tests or the blood tests or the sero tests, but we don't, and we'll probably never be able to get that level of detail if we ask for it. But
well, if you want me to jump in for a second, they have a new thing called the NFL's intensive COVID protocols. And now, starting now, the last couple of weeks, any team that has even one player on the coronavirus list, the COVID list, has to follow these rules. So I will read you what it says about testing. Maybe you can interpret it. I can't. It says, so this will answer your question maybe. The daily testing that all the NFL players are getting, including now on game day, is the PCR testing. But in addition to the daily PCR testing, all players must receive a daily POC test, which I know is point of contact test, and they have to test negative before entering the facility and commencing any activities. And this includes both tests on game day. I'll just give you quickly just a few of the other intensive COVID protocols. All meetings must occur virtually unless held outdoors or in an indoor facility with masks being worn by all. PPE/face masks must be worn in the practice fields by players and staff at all times, no exceptions. Oakley face shields, which were those shields I was trying to explain before, affixed to helmets are permitted to be worn during practice or walkthroughs. And the last one I'll give you is gloves should also be worn on the field. This is during practice by all players except quarterbacks who may leave their throwing hand uncovered. So obviously the quarterback can grip the football. So given whatever that
may be worn, that's hilarious.
Yes, well,
they may be worn.
Again, and this is the intensive COVID protocols, which led me to the question, why didn't they do all this the first 8 weeks? Why do they have to wait till they have half the league in COVID protocol before they're putting in these, which I assume you would tell me these are good ideas, but they should have been done all the time from the get-go. And if anything, been more stringent than they even are now.
Could it be because they didn't want to be appearing weak to the fans?
Well, I don't know how many fans actually see the practice. This is not in the games. In fact, recently, and maybe you're right about this part of it, recently they have a new rule just in the last, again, week or two. I think they see what's coming. I don't know if they're doing enough, but they extended the sidelines during games from the 20-yard line to the 20-yard line, which is 60 yards. So, and people who are not playing in the game have to wear face masks at all times. So I think that's to give maybe a little physical distancing. 60 yards is, you know, there's at least 53 players on the sidelines. There's a bunch of coaches and the water boys, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a ton of people on the sidelines during a game. But it's almost like, to me, the NFL just reacts as opposed to being proactive. We know this is going to be a problem. Every expert, every person with a master's degree in public health, like you said, it's going to be bad come end of October, November, into December. Those are going to be the bad months. And here we are now in November, and true to form across the country and across the NFL, there are a lot more problems than there were even 2 weeks ago.
So why aren't they wearing masks during games?
It might be a players association thing. Some of these things have to be negotiated and agreed to by the NFL and the NFLPA, which is the players association. I don't know specifically what it was on masks, but I don't recall seeing anyone. I saw some baseball players wearing masks while they were playing, but I have not seen literally one football player, one NFL player in a game wearing a mask. And if there are any, it's, you know, literally a handful maybe, but I don't think any of them are wearing them actually in the game. And maybe that's why they have these, quote, intensive COVID protocols to wear them during practices where fans would not see them.
So is that the deciding factor, that there are no fans? Or like, if you're protecting your players, either you protect them or you don't. So this is kind of my bottom line at this point in the game. We're in November 2020. After all the rallies, the political rallies, et cetera, super spreader events, the Rose Garden, et cetera. The bike rally in, you know, was it South Dakota?
South Dakota, yeah.
So as a conversation you and I had a couple days ago on the phone, and I will say it here on the record, is that it's not my job to try to convince people that COVID is real. It's not my job to try to convince them that they should wear a mask, because there's enough of that out there. And if people are not wearing a mask by now, they're on their own. The problem is, this is public health, not private health. It's not called personal health, it's public health. So my concern is that these people who may be asymptomatic carriers infecting other people unbeknownst to them, it puts it on everybody else to wear a mask to protect themselves from the people who are asymptomatic spreaders. So anyone, if you have an ear, let them hear, wear a mask, and that's it. I have better things to do, like working with youth group organizations, working with the staff of those organizations, because they are very, very stressed out right now. And I'm planning to be working with the Boys and Girls Club here in Mount Vernon, New York, to help with the stress management with the kids. And so I'll go where I'm wanted. I'll go where I can work with people, where they're interested in learning and learning what behaviors they need to display to limit their risk and increase their chance of surviving this. So again, Roger Goodell can give me a call if he wants to. I'm available to talk with him about some things, but I think just as with the CTE situation, he's just doing enough to stay ahead of the ground that's just sliding into the abyss. But he's right near the edge, and he just takes a step forward just in time so that he doesn't fall backwards. And that's the best analogy that I can give. I could be wrong. Maybe the NFL has got it dialed in and they have a lot of information that I don't. But why they would allow masks and not require masks for practice and not for games, I just don't understand it. As a public health person, who's all about preventing the preventable, it just seems to me that the NFL is not doing all that it could be doing. I don't know why this is the case, but time will tell if I'm wrong. But so far, the numbers are trending, and I wish them luck. And to the players, we love you, and just take care of yourself, and, save your money. Don't spend a lot of money. Save it up, because this is going to go well into 2021 if we don't get a handle on it in the next couple of weeks. We're in for a lot of pain in the new year.
Okay, I want to switch briefly to the fans. With respect to fans, as you know, there are different rules in different states and different stadiums all over the country. The one, surprising to me, that has the most fans allowed is down in Dallas at AT&T Stadium, where the Dallas Cowboys play.
Yeah.
They're allowed up to 20 to 25,000 fans. Supposedly they're kept in separate groups. And I also wanted to tell you, because you asked me about this once, specifically with respect to that, and there are about 10 or 12 teams now. I know the Kansas City Chiefs, when they play at home, they can have 16,000 fans. Interestingly, a lot of these teams are not even filling that low number. Normally you'd have 80,000 at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. You'd have 80 or 85,000 in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
But two things. So those are the probably two biggest numbers I know. If you have 5,000, 10,000, but there are about 10 or 12 stadiums now that allow fans. The other thing I wanted to tell you is specifically I read about tailgating at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, and the only rule they have, you're allowed to tailgate, which again surprises me, but you're the expert, you'll tell me. So if you're in parking space 1 with your tailgating group, 2, 4, 6 people, whatever it is, there's no one allowed to park in space 2. And if you've been to these games, these spaces are close together. And then you can have another tailgating party in space 3 all the way through the parking lot, as long as there's one parking spot between, and that's enough for one car, between two tailgating parties. So with 20 or 25,000 people going to Dallas games, for example, and tailgating in every other parking spot, it just strikes me as a bad situation. We do know in the first game at Kansas City, there was at least one person who tested positive, and when contact traced, there were 10 other people who were contacted and told to self-quarantine. Interestingly, I haven't seen and tried to find any other reports. I don't know if they're not reporting those kinds of things or not, but give me your overall view in terms of fans. As you know, in New York, or the Giants and the Jets play in New Jersey at the Meadowlands, no fans allowed. Up in Buffalo, New York, no fans allowed. But it's an individual state thing, apparently, even a city thing to some degree. So just give me your thoughts on, frankly, safety for fans who would come to the games. And maybe people are smart enough that they can't even sell out the 20,000 or the 16,000. They're usually a few thousand short. But we do have fans in a lot of NFL stadiums now as we enter the worst part of this pandemic to date.
Okay, so let's just go back to the Schlerin photography, and let's imagine how many people are in this group in that one parking space. Okay, they're the people that came in that particular car. What if you have a few cars that came together and they're like, oh no, we're all together. So they're going to want to park side by side because they're all in one party, theoretically, right? All right, so even if they do park one space apart, they're still going to be mixing and mingling with each other because they all came together in a caravan of 3 or 4 cars, theoretically. So let's say they're mixing and mingling, and you've got 15 people, and they're all talking and yelling and laughing and whatever, and they're creating this mist. The more people you've got, the bigger the mist you've got coming out of their respiratory tracts. And if this larger cloud is just 2 spaces away from the next group, and there's a little bit of a breeze, it's very easy to imagine, the party in parking space 1 could catch and breathe some of the air drifting over from the party of 8 in parking space 3. This is how it happens. I mean, so the more people you have together, the bigger the cloud, the more aspiration is happening. And that's a fact. But whether any of them is infected and don't know it, and there are even people who are infected and do know it and go out anyway, because they're buying into the concept of herd immunity. So they don't care if they infect other people. They think they're doing a good thing because the president has been talking about herd immunity, and they're a Trump follower. So they are deliberately going to not protect other people from themselves if they know they're COVID positive, but they feel fine. So I'm going to the game anyway. This requires a great deal of trust in each other in public spaces. And I think that by now, if you have any kind of conditions, like diabetes or respiratory issues, COPD, you should know by now you can't trust anybody to protect you from them. You're on your own. You got to protect yourself. And that's where we're at today in this country. We're the only country who's treating each other this way. And it's unfortunate. I want to say I don't understand it, but I do. This is the end result of decades of inadequate funding in public health education, in public health systems, a lack of making public health a lucrative career track. If you want to make money, don't go into public health. This is not a lucrative. Working for the county health department is not the way, to be flush in your bank account.
Make a living.
Everybody knows that. So people who go into public health do it because they have the heart for service, not for the money. And so a lot of, it's looked down upon as a lesser career because it's not lucrative. But now we're the stars because it's all about public health in the last 6 to 8 months. But nobody's listening to us because there's been such a vacuum in the public conversation about public health. So there's that. And then we've also got, you know, our public health, our public education systems have been slowly gutted over time. You know, the fact that we've got someone like Betsy DeVos in charge is a symptom of a problem that's been, you know, growing for a long time. There's a lack of respect for basic education and basic science. So for so many people in this country to really not understand the basic science of how to get infected and how it works and how your lungs can turn into wet tissue paper within a matter of days, even if you were perfectly healthy in the beginning. And then the bottom line for some people is like, yeah, but that's less than 1%. Yeah, but if that person was your loved one, that's 100% to you. And if it's preventable, it's just stupid. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Before we get to Justin Turner in the World Series, I just want to give you, or I'd like your final thoughts on the following. So we're now entering week 9. Things are getting horrible in the country. Maybe I thought it was horrific when it was 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 cases. But now Thursday and Friday of this week, before week 9, it was 126,000 cases each day, new cases, which, as you know, leads to more hospitalizations, which is now leading to over 1,000 deaths a day. We're back at that terrible number. So going forward for the NFL, starting with week 9, we're over half the teams now. 17 out of 32 have either players on the COVID list or staff members or a combination where they had to shut down their facilities. To me, it seems like it's going to get worse forward looking before it's going to get better. And even though they've been able to juggle things in the past, they made the Patriots play the Chiefs without Cam Newton, their star quarterback. But they got the game in. They moved it from, I think, Sunday to Monday. They've been able to juggle it. To me, it's like they're juggling a lot of balls in the air, and I don't know when they're going to fall. But what's your sense from now, week 9, until week 17, and then the playoffs after that? It seems to me there's going to be more problems forward-looking than there have been backward-looking, and there have been problems backward-looking. So just give me your final thoughts on the NFL and COVID for the next 8 weeks of the regular season, starting with week 9 this weekend.
I hope I'm wrong. It doesn't look good. There's not a bubble. The teams that are living and, you know, mixing socially in the areas where the per capita is high, you know, I don't know what their behaviors are going to be. I don't know if they're going to be protecting themselves. I don't know what the health education is for the athletes. I'm assuming it's going to be very bad. I'm assuming we're going to lose some athletes. They're going to die of COVID. And I'm surprised nobody has died yet. I'm not giving up. I'm just in a state of acceptance because it's not something that I can control. And I wish them the best. And they've got all the money in the world to put the best protocol in place. And they haven't yet. And I'm convinced that it's linked to the political affiliations of the team owners. And it's linked to, you know, Roger Goodell's ability to stay in his job and weather storms by doing just enough to stay, you know, and he's a stayer. I mean, he knows how to stay in his job, and good for him. But I'm very concerned about the long-term cost for the athletes. If any of them get sick, what the long-term effects for them will be if they survive it. So I wish them well.
So finally, on a separate sport note that was in the news the last few days, everybody knows about the 6th game of the World Series. The Dodgers win, they win the World Series, but strangely, in the 8th inning of the 6th game of the World Series, Justin Turner, their star third baseman, was removed from the game. Initially, nobody knew what had happened. And it turns out that during the game, and this strikes me as weird, but during the game, in the second inning, they had a test that was cloudy, but by the eighth inning, they were able to just take his test from that day, and he was positive for COVID. So in the eighth inning, he was removed from the World Series, a 3-1 game, a close game. He was taken out of the game, and the Dodgers wound up winning 3-1, winning the World Series. According to reports, Justin Turner was isolated in the doctor's office at the stadium where they were playing in Texas, of all places. And when the game ended, he wound up coming out onto the field, first wearing a mask. And supposedly the head of security went up to him and said, "You can't be out here. You've got COVID. You're positive. You have to be isolated." And they didn't say exactly what Turner said to the security guy, but according to Major League Baseball's statement, Turner vehemently disagreed and would not leave the field. If that weren't bad enough, when they took the team pictures, they all sit and stand in front of the trophy. Everybody's happy. Turner sat with a mask on next to Dave Roberts, his manager, who in 2010 was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma and is a cancer survivor. There were also reports there was at least a pregnant woman on the field. And during the picture taking, and there's video of this, Turner took his mask off literally 2 feet from his manager. And so he got a lot of grief for that. I thought correctly. The reason it was in the news this past Friday, 2 days ago, was Major League Baseball did an investigation. And at the end of the investigation, they decided no penalty at all for Justin Turner, which maybe you're going to tell me is the laissez-faire approach much of the country has to COVID, and that's why we have 235,000 dead people. I don't know. I'm interested in what your thoughts are, because the pushback has been pretty bad. Justin Turner, in my mind, should have at least been given a slap on the wrist with a fine, at least something to say it's okay, because you just won the World Series and you're so happy and you want to spend it with your teammates and your family out on the field, even though you've been diagnosed with COVID. Strikes me as a little insane, frankly. But give me an expert's thoughts on Justin Turner coming out of his isolation room, going onto the field, taking off his mask and sitting next to his manager, who's a cancer survivor.
Did the manager, cancer survivor, know that he was COVID, that the Justin was COVID positive?
I assume he did, because he's the one who has to say, "Justin, come out of the game." And he's not going to take his star third baseman out of game 6 of the World Series when it's a 3-1 game. He might take him out if it's 12-1, but I'm sure he was informed, because he's the guy who has to literally take him out of the game and put another guy in to play for him at third base.
All right. I mean, it's just an interesting dynamic that I could discuss for, more than a few minutes. But bottom line is, how old is the athlete?
I think he's 34. And the manager, I believe, is now 49 or 50.
Okay. So they're different generations, essentially. So all I'm going to say at this point is that our society seems to have gone upside down. There are no consequences for bad behavior lately. People lie, they don't apologize, they don't retract their statements, they insult people, they bully people, they have people, arrested, wrongful arrest. A lot of really wrong things going on that people are not being held accountable for. Police killing Black people for no reason, literally no reason. And our laws do not provide for a way to hold them accountable for that. So there are these legal loopholes in the extreme case, but in social graces and things like that, we're just a society that is not holding people accountable for things. And I fear for the future, for the children who are growing up seeing this all around them. So I don't know what was going on in the athlete's head. of course he'd want to be out there to share in the happiness and celebration of his team. Of course he'd want to take the mask off for the photo. Of course. I mean, it totally makes sense. And do I think he was wrong to do it? Yeah, he could have at least like not been near the manager, who everybody knows is a cancer patient. Why would he go right up to the manager, 2 feet away from the manager? Was that a passive aggressive move saying, yeah, I'm here? You know, what are you going to do? Throw me off in front of the world, media?
Well, I think there's something to what you just said, because apparently security had a conversation with Major League Baseball and they decided not to physically remove him from the field because of the optics of that.
Imagine the optics.
Right.
So he can just say, F you, I'm staying. What are you going to do? Pick me up and drag me off the field? Not going to happen. It would, the team would not permit that.
Correct.
So, and he knew that, and he was playing a dangerous game. So now we'll see. I mean, hopefully nobody got infected. Probably, I don't know how long he was out there. Was he yelling and spewing, saliva mist on everybody? I don't know. If he came out with a mask, then, if they were outside, he wasn't in close contact with a lot of people. But for sure now everyone has to be tested. And I wish everyone the best, but that's where we're at today. The consequences for behavior may not be so immediate. Karma takes care of everything eventually, but the the league doesn't necessarily do the job.
This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports, along with Janelle Allbritton, MPH, speaking of wellness. This has been the NFL and COVID with a little Justin Turner at the end. We'll see you the next time.